Norwich MP Simon Wright has decided he will vote against a plan to increase the cap on tuition fees. The Liberal Democrat has been under intense pressure from students after saying he still hadn't made up his mind.
At the University of East Anglia, in Mr Wright's constituency, a sign of just how strongly students feel about this issue. Around a dozen of them occupied the council house this morning.
We're doing this to draw attention to the fact that there are going to be devastating budget cuts and devastating tuition fees brought on university students and university staff. It's going to bankrupt students.
Like all Liberal Democrats, Simon Wright has found himself in a difficult position. There was a lot in the government's proposals for university funding which he liked, but during the election he had promised not to vote for any increase in fees. His surprise win was largely due to the student vote. His colleagues in other university seats were quick to say they'd stick to their word. He wanted more time to make up his mind.
The news that Simon Wright has decided to vote against a rise in tuition fees is absolutely amazing. We're really, really happy that he's come out. It's really reassuring that an MP has listened to what his constituents have been saying and has actually decided to vote in that way.
Party sources tell me that Mr Wright won't get into trouble for voting against the government next week. They know he's been in a difficult position. They also know that despite the protests, they're likely to win the vote. Andrew Sinclair, BBC Look East, Norwich.
Well, earlier this afternoon I spoke to Simon Wright. I began by asking him whether his decision was one of conviction or calculation.
Well, throughout my election campaign, I made it very, very clear my personal opposition to tuition fees. It played a very key role in my campaign. It was on the front of many of my election leaflets, and I communicated with my constituents repeatedly about my opposition to this system. So because it played such a key role in my election, I feel I've got a personal mandate on this issue. And having discussed in the last few weeks with my constituents, many of them have made it very, very clear that they want me to use that mandate to vote against the government's proposals. That's not a decision I take lightly, because there is actually an entire package of proposals here, some of which I do welcome.
But why has it taken you so long? I understand you wanted to talk to your constituents, but the other Lib Dem MPs in university seats in this region came out very early on and said they were going to stand by their pledge. This doesn't make you look like a man of principle, does it?
Well, there are two reasons why I didn't come out early to say how I would be voting. The first of those is because I actually wanted to communicate with government ministers about my feelings on the proposals and the early representations that I was receiving from my constituents. And I felt that ministers would be far more likely to listen to me when they knew that I have a neutral position. But then I also wanted to communicate what the government was proposing to my constituents directly and get their opinions of it. Because whilst this package does include an increase in tuition fee, there are many other aspects of the package which I think many of my constituents will welcome. One of those is that part-time students will no longer have to pay their tuition fees up front. So under this system, no student will pay upfront tuition fees. Another aspect that I welcome is that the graduate repayment on the loans works in a much fairer way based on your income, and actually a quarter of all graduates, the lower earning graduates under the government's proposals, will actually be paying less back into the system overall than they do under the existing system.
You sound like you're trying to sell this package and this is what you're going to vote against.
Well, I think it's a package which does have some positives to it, so I cannot deny that. I'm going to vote against it because I made it very clear in my election campaign that I oppose tuition fees and that I would oppose an increase in tuition fees. And having been given the mandate by my electorate and having listened to their views on the package, I've decided to use that mandate, and I will be voting against the government.
Simon Wright, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Campaigners are using the case of a woman from Suffolk to highlight what they believe are serious failings in the care of older people in the NHS. 96-year-old Muriel Browning was taken to hospital after a fall but died a few weeks later.
Muriel Browning's daughter has many treasured pictures of her mother. This is one. It's how she likes to remember her, bright, independent. But this is the image which still haunts her. It was taken in hospital shortly before Muriel died.
To see her in that state, a woman who had spent her life teaching, a feisty old lady, reduced to the stage where she says, I want to die, because of the treatment she received in Ipswich Hospital. I'm heartbroken.
These cases are extremely worrying, and the fact that we hear so many similarities between them that suggests there's a real problem here that's similar across the NHS is actually makes it even more worrying. These aren't one-offs. There's the same thing happening over and over again. The NHS is not learning. The system is not improving.
Muriel was admitted to hospital after a fall at the end of July last year. She died on August the 27th. Today, in a statement, Ipswich Hospital said, "We investigate every concern raised by patients and their relatives very thoroughly. We're sorry that this relative has had an unhappy experience. There are always different perspectives, and in this particular instance, we do not recognise or agree with the relative's perspective."
She was physically very sturdy, and she would have gone on to 100. I was quite convinced. Had she not had the fall and ended up in Ipswich Hospital, she would have been with us now. I'm absolutely convinced.
In the journals which she keeps, there is this poignant entry: the moment her mother was lost, the moment she decided to lobby for change. Kevin Birch, BBC Look East at Hoseley in Suffolk.